On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. Glenda Jackson, a towering figure in both the arts and politics, passed away peacefully at the age of 87 on June 15, 2023. Her death, due to natural causes, marked the end of an extraordinary life that spanned two of Britain's most demanding arenas, stage and state. Jackson's passing was not just the loss of a brilliant actress or a principled politician, but the departure of a woman who relentlessly challenged the expectations of gender, power, and public service in the 20th and 21st centuries. As an actress, Jackson came to prominence in the 1960s and 70s with performances that broke molds. Fierce, unapologetic portrayals of complex women in films like Women in Love and A Touch of Class, both of which earned her Academy Awards. Her on-screen presence reflected an era grappling with shifting cultural mores and the rise of feminist consciousness. Later, her decision to step away from acting at the height of her fame to serve as a member of Parliament for over 2 decades epitomized a deeper commitment that art and politics were not separate, but deeply intertwined. Jackson's death prompted tributes from both the entertainment industry and political world, a rare convergence that underscored her dual legacy. In an era where celebrities often hover on the edges of political discourse, Jackson had fully crossed that line, and with integrity. Her departure invited reflection on the courage it takes to defy public expectation, to move from performance to policy, and to speak truth to power with both eloquence and tenacity. Though her death did not shift global politics or cinema overnight, it amplified her legend as a woman who lived fiercely and spoke fiercely. In the public imagination, she remains emblematic of a generation unwilling to be boxed in by roles, on stage, screen, or society. In remembering Glenda Jackson, we are reminded of how mortality strips away titles but leaves legacy. Through revivals of her films, parliamentary archives, and the stories passed from one inspired woman to another, she endures. Her life, marked by conviction and intellect, teaches us that memory does not reside solely in statues or ceremonies, but in the courage to live authentically. Through her, we reflect on how art and action together shape history, and how bold voices refuse to fade. Ella Fitzgerald, the First Lady of Song, died on June 15, 1996, at the age of 79, from complications related to diabetes. Her passing marked the end of an era in American music, one defined by resilience, artistic excellence, and the quiet strength of a woman who overcame systemic barriers to become one of the most beloved voices of the 20th century. Fitzgerald's death was the result of natural causes, though her final years were marked by intense health challenges. In 1993, both of her legs were amputated below the knee due to complications from diabetes, and she spent her final days in her Beverly Hills home surrounded by family and music. Her death was peaceful, yet profoundly symbolic. In a time when African American women often struggled for visibility and dignity, Fitzgerald's graceful departure mirrored the humility with which she had always carried her immense fame. Her passing evoked a wave of tributes from around the world. President Bill Clinton called her an American treasure, and the global jazz community mourned the loss of not only a virtuoso performer, but a symbol of artistic integrity. Her voice had transcended race, class, and genre. In a society historically riddled with segregation and prejudice, Fitzgerald stood as a shining example of how art could unify. Ella Fitzgerald's death amplified her legend in many ways. For younger generations discovering her posthumously, she became more than a performer. She was a symbol of excellence under pressure, grace amidst injustice. Her voice, with its three-octave range and impeccable diction, continued to echo in the halls of American culture, influencing singers from every genre. What her death and enduring legacy reveals about humanity is this: we turn to music to make sense of the human experience. In Ella, we found not only extraordinary technical skill, but the warmth and vulnerability that allowed generations to feel seen, soothed, and uplifted. Today, Fitzgerald is immortalized through countless awards, recordings, and tributes. Jazz festivals bear her name, and her voice still plays in film, television, and streaming playlists. Her image graces murals, stamps, and statues. But her true memorial lies in the way she changed the cultural soundscape. Ella Fitzgerald showed us that greatness doesn't always shout, it often sings. And in her song, she became timeless. Maureen Arthur, a vibrant actress known for her comedic timing and vivacious screen presence, passed away on June 15, 2022, at the age of 88 due to natural causes. Best remembered for her performance as Hetty LaRue in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, both on Broadway and in the 1967 film adaptation, Arthur's passing marked the quiet end of a career that thrived during a time of shifting gender roles and cultural expectations in entertainment. Her death was not the subject of global headlines, but it resonated with fans of classic Broadway and 1960s cinema, a reminder of a glamorous, transitional era in American popular culture. Arthur embodied a type of character that was both a product of and a commentary on her time. The alluring secretary, caught between the remnants of post-war traditionalism and the burgeoning feminist movement. Her comedic roles often played with the stereotypes of femininity, challenging them through exaggerated performance and charisma. Arthur's passing highlighted a broader conversation about the legacy of actresses whose careers were shaped by the studio system and Broadway's golden age. In an industry often focused on youth and reinvention, performers like her carved out lasting impressions by leaning into their individuality. Her death, while not altering the trajectory of history, served as a cultural bookmark, inviting reflection on how entertainment once mirrored and occasionally challenged society's views on gender and ambition. The immediate consequences of her passing were largely centered in nostalgic circles. Tributes from co-stars, theater enthusiasts, and classic film fans who recalled her comic brilliance and distinctive voice. Yet in this remembrance lies the deeper impact. How figures like Arthur remain vivid, not because they dominated headlines, but because they brought joy, humor, and sharp commentary to their roles. Maureen Arthur's legacy lives on in the preserved recordings of her work and in the memory of a time when musicals and screwball comedies served as both escapism and subtle critique. Her career, though not mythologized on the scale of screen legends, reminds us that immortality in culture does not require grandiosity. It often lives in laughter, charm, and the enduring flicker of performance. Her passing reminds us that the theater and screen are archives of memory, and that in every laugh and line delivered with flair, performers like Arthur continue to live, framed in light, preserved in story. Jacques Bergerac, a French actor and businessman, passed away on June 15, 2014, at the age of 87, due to natural causes. Best known for his film roles during the 1950s and early 1960s, and for his high-profile marriage to Ginger Rogers, Bergerac's death marked the quiet end of a life that intersected with Hollywood glamour, post-war European elegance, and the evolving role of celebrity beyond the screen. Bergerac's path to fame was unconventional. Originally a law student in France, he was discovered by Rogers while she was on vacation. Their marriage brought him to the spotlight, and soon he was cast in American films such as Gigi, 1958, and Les Girls, 1957. While he never achieved the same level of stardom as some of his contemporaries, Bergerac represented a cosmopolitan allure at a time when the world was rebuilding from war and eager to embrace sophistication and cultural exchange. His passing was gentle and relatively unheralded, a reflection of the kind of fame he embodied, graceful, modest, and firmly rooted in a bygone era. The lack of widespread media attention also underscored a shift in cultural memory, a reminder that celebrity, like all fame, is fleeting unless tethered to broader historical or artistic movements. Still, for classic cinema enthusiasts and those who followed mid-century Hollywood, Bergerac's death offered a moment to revisit the post-war era's fascination with foreign charm and romantic idealism. Though not a transformative figure in cinema history, Bergerac's life and career highlighted the mid-20th century's values: beauty, internationalism, and the golden promise of reinvention. He later left acting to enter business, eventually leading Revlon's operations in Europe and heading up a perfume company. His career shift prefigured the later trend of actors becoming entrepreneurs, blurring the lines between fame and commerce. Jacques Bergerac's legacy lies not in groundbreaking performances or scandalous headlines, but in the graceful way he moved between worlds, law and art, Europe and America, spotlight and boardroom. His story reminds us that mortality does not erase impact, it reframes it. We immortalize figures like Bergerac not necessarily through grand monuments, but through the quiet elegance of preserved films, remembered charm, and the recognition that every era has its own icons, some loud, others softly enduring. Sherry Martel, born Sherry Shruel, was a trailblazing figure in the world of professional wrestling, remembered for her fierce persona, dynamic charisma, and ability to bridge the gap between traditional femininity and athletic dominance. She died on June 15, 2007, at the age of 49, from a drug overdose, an all-too-common fate among wrestling professionals of her era. Her death was sudden and tragic, occurring at her mother's home in Alabama, and cast a somber light on the physical and emotional toll the wrestling industry can take. Martel rose to fame in the 1980s and early 1990s, an era when women in wrestling were still often relegated to supporting roles. Yet she shattered expectations, not just as a wrestler but as a manager, elevating male stars like Macho Man Randy Savage, Shawn Michaels, and Ted DiBiase. Her persona, Sensational Sherry, was loud, defiant, and unapologetically powerful. She wasn't there to be eye candy. She was there to dominate. Her death reflected deeper issues of her time: the grueling demands of the wrestling circuit, minimal support for performers' long-term health, and the culture of silence around addiction and mental health in the industry. Sherry, like many of her peers, paid the price for a system that often celebrated excess while offering little in terms of care once the spotlight faded. The immediate reaction to her passing was one of widespread mourning within the wrestling community. Fans and fellow performers paid tribute to her legacy, highlighting not only her in-ring achievements, but also her pioneering spirit. WWE honored her posthumously with induction into the Hall of Fame in 2006, a year before her death, which served as a living recognition of her contributions to the sport. Sherry Martel's legend did not so much shift history as clarify it, forcing the wrestling world and its audience to confront the cost of fame and the resilience of women in a male-dominated arena. In her flamboyant entrances, fierce matches, and commanding presence, she became a symbol of transformation in sports entertainment. Her death invites a reflection on how we remember those who pushed boundaries but were ultimately broken by the very structures they helped build. Through archival footage, fan tributes, and institutional recognition, Sherry Martel remains immortal, not just as a sensational performer, but as a symbol of strength, struggle, and the enduring impact of visibility in a world still learning how to value its trailblazers. Nadia Gray, a Romanian-born actress best remembered for her poised and elegant roles in European cinema, died of natural causes on June 13, 1994, in New York City. She was 70. While her passing was quiet, far from the dramatic exits of historical monarchs or political martyrs, it nevertheless signified the fading of a certain European cinematic sophistication rooted in post-war art and aristocratic allure. Gray's most iconic role came in Federico Fellini's La Dolce Vita, 1960, where she played a wealthy heiress hosting a decadent party in a crumbling Roman mansion, a scene that would come to symbolize the existential fatigue of post-war Europe's upper classes. Her performance was marked by elegance, detachment, and a subtle commentary on the aimlessness of elite society. In many ways, Gray herself embodied that era's contradictions. Born into privilege in Romania, she fled fascism and communism, eventually remaking herself in Western European film circles. Her death, while not violent or unexpected, reflects the gradual disappearance of an entire generation of European artists whose careers were shaped by exile, war, reinvention, and the blending of aristocratic and artistic identities. The post-war film industry offered a refuge and a platform for many such figures, and Gray's career was a product of both privilege and displacement, a common duality of her era. The immediate response to her death was modest in the public eye, but film enthusiasts and scholars of European cinema acknowledged it as the end of a chapter in refined, auteur-driven film history. She was a figure from a world that no longer quite exists, one in which style, poise, and global turmoil merged on screen in layered performances. Gray's death invites reflection on the quieter forms of legacy. Unlike figures whose deaths caused global upheaval, her influence remains in the atmosphere of classic cinema and in the characters that still grace screens decades later. She is remembered not through mass mourning, but through celluloid, a lasting tribute in shadow and light. In the broader conversation on mortality and memory, Gray's passing reminds us that legacy isn't always forged through noise or upheaval. Sometimes it lingers in elegance, in the fading glow of a chandelier-lit ballroom, or in a smile cast across a black-and-white screen. Through her roles, Nadia Gray is gently immortalized, an echo of a world where cinema itself was a form of resistance, identity, and rebirth. Victor French, best known for his warm and rugged roles on television classics like Little House on the Prairie and Highway to Heaven, died of lung cancer on June 15, 1989, at the age of 54. His death, the result of a natural but preventable illness tied to smoking, a habit common and culturally normalized for much of his life, reflected broader mid-20th century attitudes toward health, masculinity, and mortality. French's passing struck a particularly poignant chord among fans and colleagues. Having built a career portraying kind-hearted, salt-of-the-earth characters, he was seen as an everyman with a deeply empathetic screen presence. His close collaboration with Michael Landon, especially on Highway to Heaven, where the two tackled themes of redemption, grief, and human decency, made French more than a supporting actor. He became a symbol of quiet strength and moral grounding on television during a time of increasing cynicism in popular media. The immediate consequence of his death was a deep sense of loss among those who saw him not just as a performer, but as a voice of compassion. Highway to Heaven was still in syndication, and many viewers had grown emotionally attached to his portrayal of Mark Gordon, the skeptical but loyal partner to Landon's angelic Jonathan Smith. His departure from the world marked the end of an era when network television dared to address faith, hope, and mortality head-on, without irony or spectacle. French's death did not cause a global cultural shift, but it amplified his legend within the hearts of viewers who saw in him a reflection of decency often missing from the larger-than-life figures of Hollywood. in an age where celebrity was becoming increasingly performative, French represented authenticity, a man who played characters rooted in emotional reality. His legacy lives on in reruns, in the soft moral lessons of his television work, and in the quiet reverence of fans who remember his voice, his expressions, and his deep, grounding presence. French's death reminds us that not all historical echoes come from moments of grandeur or violence. Some come in the form of subtle kindnesses, carried through stories and performances that continue to comfort audiences long after the actor himself is gone. In remembering Victor French, we're reminded that mortality is universal, but how we live and how we are remembered depends on the impact we leave behind in the hearts of others. James Knox Polk, the 11th President of the United States, died on June 15, 1849, just 103 days after leaving office. His death was due to cholera, a disease that swept through parts of the country during the mid-19th century in deadly outbreaks. Ironically, Polk had just completed one of the most ambitious and expansionist presidencies in American history, a term defined by territorial conquest, war, and ceaseless administrative vigor. His sudden death marked a sharp contrast, a powerful man brought down not by political enemies or war, but by a microscopic enemy emblematic of the era's limited public health knowledge. Polk's demise was reflective of the 19th century tension between progress and fragility. Under his leadership, the United States had stretched its borders dramatically, through the annexation of Texas, the Oregon Treaty with Britain, and the conclusion of the Mexican-American War, which added present-day California, Arizona, and New Mexico to the Union. His presidency embodied manifest destiny, the belief that American expansion across the continent was both justified and inevitable. Yet Polk's unrelenting commitment to duty came at a personal cost. He worked long hours, rarely took breaks, and aged visibly during his single term. By his own choice, he declined to run for re-election. It is said he returned to private life, physically depleted. Within 3 months of leaving office, he was dead. His passing reinforced a harsh truth of the time. Even the most powerful men were vulnerable to the era's frequent and indiscriminate diseases. The consequences of Polk's death were more symbolic than political. Though he had accomplished much, he had few years to shape his legacy or engage in elder statesmanship. His early death perhaps prevented more critical scrutiny of his policies, particularly the Mexican-American War, which many later viewed as an unjust conflict. At the time, however, he was celebrated as a man who fulfilled every promise he made on the campaign trail. Polk is memorialized in statues, in the name of counties and schools, and at his modest presidential tomb in Tennessee. Yet his legacy remains complicated, marked by territorial gain and the seeds of division that would later erupt in civil war. Polk's death reminds us that power does not immunize one from mortality, and that the pursuit of greatness often comes with personal sacrifice. We remember such figures not only for what they built, but for how their stories illuminate the costs of ambition and the fragility of human life amid historical forces. On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. George Reeves, best remembered as the original television Superman, died under mysterious and tragic circumstances on June 16, 1959, at the age of 45. Found dead in his Los Angeles home from a gunshot wound to the head, the official ruling was suicide. Yet the bizarre details surrounding his death, no fingerprints on the weapon, delayed police response, and multiple people in the house at the time, sparked decades of speculation and conspiracy. Some believe he was murdered, possibly due to his entanglements with Hollywood elites. The uncertainty has only deepened the mystique surrounding his life and legacy. Reeves rose to fame in the 1950s as Superman in Adventures of Superman, a role that became both his greatest success and his greatest burden. In an era when television was becoming the dominant cultural medium, Reeves became a household name. But the fame came at a cost. Typecast as the Man of Steel, Reeves struggled to find serious acting work afterward. He longed to be respected as a dramatic actor, but Hollywood, locked in rigid studio systems and image branding, refused to let him escape the Cape. His death reflected the pressures of fame in a rapidly modernizing entertainment industry. The 1950s celebrated heroic male figures and wholesome ideals, yet behind that curtain were stories of isolation, broken dreams, and psychological struggles, issues rarely spoken of at the time. Reeves's fall from grace, from national hero to embattled actor, mirrored the limitations of a society that worshipped icons, but offered them little human compassion. The immediate aftermath of Reeves's death was public confusion and sorrow, particularly from young fans who couldn't reconcile the image of Superman with the tragedy of his demise. Over time, his death came to symbolize the darker underbelly of celebrity culture. Theories about his death have kept his name in public discourse, from books to the 2006 film Hollywoodland, which dramatized the event and reignited public interest. Reeves is immortalized not just as Superman, but as a figure emblematic of Hollywood's golden age and its hidden sorrows. His story reveals a timeless truth. Our heroes, however superhuman they appear, are often most deeply human in their suffering. In remembering George Reeves, we confront the fragile intersection of myth and man, and the enduring need to understand, preserve, and humanize those we elevate. Frank Bonner, best known for his portrayal of the flamboyantly self-absorbed sales manager Herb Tarlek on the beloved sitcom WKRP in Cincinnati, died on June 16, 2021, at the age of 79. His death was attributed to complications from Lewy body dementia, a progressive neurological disease that affects memory, thinking, and motor functions. Unlike the tragic and abrupt deaths that often shock the public, Bonner's passing was a quieter event, reflective of a man whose fame was steady but never overshadowed by scandal or sensationalism. Bonner's career thrived in the 1970s and 1980s, a period when television sitcoms offered an escape from the political and social turmoil of the times. As Herb Tarlek, Bonner embodied the excesses and comedic obliviousness of the era's corporate culture, clad in mismatched polyester suits and armed with painfully cheesy sales pitches. His character was a satire of outdated masculinity and the hollow optimism of American capitalism during a time of economic uncertainty and shifting cultural norms. The nature of Bonner's death, natural and due to a degenerative disease, resonates with the challenges faced by many aging entertainers. While he remained active in television well into the 2000s, directing and guest starring, his later years were marked by a retreat from the spotlight, emblematic of how the entertainment industry often sidelines its veterans. His illness, like those of other public figures such as Robin Williams, who also battled Lewy body dementia, helped bring awareness to a disease that is still under-recognized. The immediate consequences of Bonner's passing were tributes from fans and castmates, particularly those who remembered his warmth and humor off-screen. His death did not shift the course of history, but it did stir nostalgia for an era of television when characters like Herb Tarlek brought levity to American living rooms during uncertain times. Frank Bonner is immortalized through reruns, behind-the-scenes anecdotes, and the enduring charm of WKRP in Cincinnati. His legacy is not one of sweeping political change or revolutionary artistry, but of making people laugh and sometimes cringe in ways that still resonate. In remembering Bonner, we reflect on how even those not cast as heroes or historical giants leave behind echoes of joy and cultural texture. Through shared memory, celebration of work, and continued viewing, we keep alive not just characters but the lives behind them. Paxton Whitehead, a distinguished British character actor known for his mastery of comedic timing and classical stage presence, passed away on June 16, 2023, at the age of 85 from natural causes. His death marked the end of a long and richly varied career that spanned over 6 decades across stage, film, and television. Though he was never a household name in the conventional sense, Whitehead's presence was unmistakable. His crisp diction, refined demeanor, and subtle wit made him a favorite in both Shakespearean theater and American sitcoms. Whitehead's death came at a time when the theatrical arts, especially classical theater, were reckoning with declining attention amid a digital age dominated by streaming and short-form media. As a classically trained actor who brought gravitas to farce and intelligence to comedy, his career symbolized the values of a bygone era, one that revered training, textual fidelity, and craft. His passing reminded many of the importance of sustaining such traditions, even as entertainment evolves. His most well-known screen role, perhaps, was in the 1986 film Back to School, where he played the pompous business professor opposite Rodney Dangerfield's irreverent millionaire student. It was a role that epitomized the comic archetype he played so well, the dignified, slightly flustered authority figure. Yet off-screen, Whitehead was known for his humility, mentorship, and love for theater, directing and performing well into his later years. The immediate response to his death was quiet but heartfelt. Tributes poured in from the theater community, especially from those who had shared the stage with him or been taught by him. While his passing didn't send shockwaves through the public like the deaths of screen legends might, it left a noticeable void in the world of repertory theater and among connoisseurs of refined performance. Whitehead's legacy is carried not through pop culture mythology, but through the enduring respect of the theater world. He is immortalized in playbills, archived recordings, and the memories of audiences who witnessed his brilliance live. His death reminds us that power and memory aren't always loud or revolutionary. They can be cultivated in a lifetime of consistency, discipline, and quiet excellence. In remembering Paxton Whitehead, we honor not just a performer, but a standard-bearer of an art form that prizes intellect, subtlety, and tradition. Helmut Kohl, the towering figure of post-war German politics and the architect of German reunification, died on June 16, 2017, at the age of 87. His death, from natural causes following years of ill health, marked the end of an era not only for Germany, but for a Europe that he helped reshape. Kohl's passing offered a moment of deep reflection on the values of unity, democracy, and the burden of leadership in a rapidly changing world. Kohl came to prominence during the Cold War, a period defined by ideological division and the literal wall that split his homeland. As Chancellor of West Germany from 1982 to 1990, and of the reunified Germany until 1998, he steered the nation through its most pivotal moment since World War II. His unwavering commitment to reunification, despite economic and political risks, reflected a post-war generation's yearning to heal historic wounds. His role in anchoring Germany within a peaceful European framework also symbolized a broader shift from nationalism to continental cooperation. When he died, tributes poured in from global leaders who remembered him as a statesman of rare conviction. Yet his legacy was also complex. In later years, Kohl faced political isolation due to a party financing scandal, highlighting the persistent tension between personal legacy and political accountability. His death offered both closure and complication, a final chapter to a life that shaped a nation, but not without controversy. The immediate consequence of his passing was a surge in public and political remembrance. Cole was the first person ever honored with a European Union-level memorial service, a symbolic testament to his lasting impact on continental unity. In Germany, there were debates about how to commemorate him, underscoring how even national heroes are continually reassessed through the lens of present-day values. Helmut Kohl's death reminds us how leaders become both architects and artifacts of history. In memorials, documentaries, public debates, and even political textbooks, his image endures as both a symbol and a subject of scrutiny. Through remembrance, we negotiate how to balance greatness with imperfection, and how the mortality of even the most powerful invites reflection on what endures beyond flesh and office. In Cole's case, it is the vision of unity, fragile, hard-won, and deeply human, that remains. Tony Gwynn, one of Major League Baseball's most beloved and consistent hitters, passed away on June 16, 2014 at the age of 54 from salivary gland cancer. His death, caused by a rare form of cancer linked to the use of chewing tobacco, cast a somber light on a long-standing and culturally embedded habit within the sport. Gwynn's passing was not only a personal tragedy, but a catalyst for conversations about health, athlete responsibility, and the legacy of those who represent not just excellence in sport, but character off the field. A career-long San Diego Padre, Gwynn was renowned for his pure hitting ability, achieving a .338 lifetime batting average and earning 8 batting titles. He was a throwback figure in an era increasingly dominated by power-hitting and performance-enhancing controversies. Gwynn's dedication to his craft, studying video footage long before it became standard practice, embodied a work ethic and humility that resonated with fans and fellow athletes alike. His death shocked the sports world, not just because of his relatively young age, but because it brought to the forefront the consequences of a once casual attitude toward tobacco and baseball culture. In the days and weeks following his passing, players, coaches, and even Major League Baseball itself took a harder stance against smokeless tobacco, with several teams banning it from clubhouses and stadiums. Gwynn's death thus became a point of reckoning for a sport steeped in tradition, pushing it toward a more health-conscious future. Gwynn's legend only grew after his death. Fans mourned not just a great hitter, but a man who stayed loyal to one team and who, post-retirement, dedicated himself to coaching and mentoring young players. Statues, scholarships, stadium renamings, and tributes poured in, not as acts of nostalgia, but as affirmations of the values Gwynn represented: dedication, humility, and integrity. His passing reflects a broader human truth, that mortality often reveals the full measure of a life. In death, as in life, Tony Gwynn reminded the world that greatness is not only in records or championships, but in how one plays the game, on the field and off. Through murals, Hall of Fame memorials, and the continued admiration of fans and players, his legacy remains both a lesson and a light. Vicki Brown, a celebrated British vocalist known for her rich harmonies and soulful contributions to pop and rock music, passed away on June 16, 1991, after a battle with breast cancer. Her death, though from natural causes, resonated within an era increasingly aware of both the personal cost of illness and the importance of female voices in the music industry, not only as frontwomen, but as foundational contributors behind the scenes. Brown's career was defined by versatility. From her early days with the Vernon's Girls and the Breakaways, to her work as a backing vocalist for some of the most iconic artists of the 1970s and 1980s, including Elton John, George Harrison, and Pink Floyd, she remained largely out of the spotlight, yet was instrumental in shaping the sound of an era. Her harmonies, often soaring yet subtle, became a signature element in numerous chart-topping hits. Though she had a solo career of her own and collaborated closely with her husband Joe Brown and daughter, Sam Brown, her identity remained that of a powerful yet unassuming presence in a male-dominated industry. Her death at just 50 years old came at a time when public discourse around cancer, especially breast cancer, was becoming more open and urgent. The early 90s saw growing advocacy for research funding and awareness, and Brown's passing underscored the disease's indiscriminate reach, touching even those whose voices had brought so much light and energy to others. The immediate consequence of her passing was a wave of tributes from fellow musicians and fans who recognized her quiet but vital influence. While she never sought the spotlight, her absence made clear how much of the musical landscape she had helped define. Over time, Vicki Brown has been remembered not only through recordings, but through the ongoing work of her family and music, creating a legacy rooted in sound, spirit, and resilience. Her death, like many of those who support from behind the curtain, reminds us how memory and fame can diverge, and how we often come to appreciate contributions only when they fall silent. In remembering Brown, we reflect on how music immortalizes its makers, especially those whose harmony shaped not only songs, but sentiments. Through re-releases, vocal analyses, and familial tributes, her voice continues to echo, reminding us of the quiet power behind every great chorus. Eileen Way, a distinguished British actress known for her work on stage, television, and film, died of natural causes on June 16, 1994, at the age of 82. Her passing marked the quiet conclusion of a life dedicated to the craft of acting, a career that, while never commanding headline stardom, left a lasting impression on audiences who cherished the understated strength of character actors. Best remembered for her appearances in early British television, including the groundbreaking Doctor Who, Way played roles that reflected a transitional time in British entertainment. As post-war Britain evolved and television emerged as a dominant medium, she represented a generation of performers who bridged classical stage training and the emerging power of broadcast storytelling. Her portrayals often carried a dignity and gravitas that echoed the values of resilience, tradition, and adaptability, core to Britain's cultural identity in the 20th century. Her death came at a time when British television was undergoing yet another transformation, increasingly moving toward faster-paced, commercialized storytelling. The passing of actors like Way symbolized the fading of a more measured, theatrical era, one that valued performance over celebrity. Though her death did not generate the global headlines of a major star, it rippled through theatrical and science fiction communities, particularly among Doctor Who fans, who had come to revere the early pioneers of the show. The immediate consequence of her passing was a renewed appreciation for her contributions. Tributes from actors and writers recalled not only her talent, but her professionalism and presence, qualities that often go unrecognized in a celebrity-obsessed culture. Her legacy endures in reruns, film archives, and fan conventions where her roles are still celebrated. Eileen Way's death, while quiet and natural, reflects the broader theme of how society regards those who contribute meaningfully behind the scenes. It reminds us that mortality does not discriminate between the famous and the foundational. Her memory is preserved not in marble statues or grand biographies, but in the enduring warmth of character and performance, testaments to a life spent enriching stories that were never solely her own. We immortalize such figures through the roles they played and the audiences they touched. Their legacy, like Way's, is a reminder that memory and meaning often live on in the subtle spaces between the lines. John Snow, the pioneering English physician and father of modern epidemiology, died of a stroke on June 16, 1858, at the age of 45. His death, though natural, came at a time when his revolutionary ideas about disease transmission were still met with skepticism by many in the medical establishment. Snow's passing marked the premature end of a life committed to science, reason, and public health reform, just as the world was beginning to recognize the magnitude of his contributions. Living in the midst of Victorian London, a city plagued by overcrowding, poor sanitation, and deadly epidemics, Snow challenged the prevailing miasma theory, which held that diseases like cholera were spread through foul-smelling air. During the 1854 Broad Street cholera outbreak, he famously traced the source of the illness to a contaminated water pump, using a combination of data mapping and interviews with local residents. By removing the pump handle, he not only halted the outbreak, but laid the foundation for public health surveillance and evidence-based medicine. Yet, Snow's groundbreaking work was only partially accepted in his lifetime. The medical elite remained largely entrenched in older theories, and his ideas did not immediately reshape policy. His death therefore represents the frustrating paradox of scientific progress in the 19th century, a time when innovation surged ahead, often in defiance of institutional inertia. The consequences of Snow's death were subtle but profound. Over time, as germ theory gained acceptance and sanitation infrastructure improved, his findings became central to modern epidemiology and urban planning. Posthumous recognition elevated Snow to near legendary status, transforming him from a dissenting physician into a global symbol of rationalism, persistence, and the power of data in saving lives. John Snow's legacy is immortalized in medical schools, textbooks, and even in London's Soho district, where a replica of the Broad Street pump stands as a monument to his insight. His life and death remind us of humanity's enduring quest to understand and overcome the invisible forces that threaten health. They reflect a deep-seated truth that power lies not only in institutions or fame, but in the clarity of thought, courage to question, and the determination to follow evidence, no matter how unpopular. Through such figures, memory becomes both a celebration of past triumphs and a guide for future vigilance. On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. Cyd Charisse, the iconic American dancer and actress, passed away on June 17, 2008 at the age of 86, following a heart attack. Her death, from natural causes, marked the quiet end of an extraordinary career that had once dazzled the golden age of Hollywood. Though not surrounded by the political storms or tragic violence that defined some historic deaths, Charisse's passing nonetheless reflected a broader cultural moment, the fading of classic cinematic glamour and the graceful twilight of a bygone era in American entertainment. Charisse rose to fame in the 1940s and 1950s as a statuesque, fluid dancer whose performances redefined how femininity, strength, and artistry were portrayed on screen. In films like Singin' in the Rain and The Bandwagon, she danced opposite legends such as Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire, not merely as a supporting partner, but as a visual and emotional centerpiece of the productions. At a time when Hollywood musicals offered post-war audiences escape and aspiration, her work embodied elegance, discipline, and a uniquely American optimism rooted in performance and spectacle. Her death came at a time when digital technology and shifting tastes were rapidly transforming how audiences consumed entertainment. The Hollywood system that had once groomed stars like Charisse no longer existed, and her passing reminded many of the artistry, rigor, and studio polish that had characterized her generation of performers. Unlike the tragic falls of some of her peers, Charisse aged with grace, retired quietly, and remained admired for her refined persona, an image that contrasted starkly with the era of tabloid celebrity that followed. In the immediate aftermath of her death, tributes poured in from dancers, filmmakers, and historians, acknowledging not just her talent, but her role in elevating dance as cinematic language. Charisse had helped make dance not a diversion, but a form of emotional storytelling. Her legacy endures in film archives, dance schools, retrospectives, and even the affectionate homages found in modern musicals and television. Like other legends of the silver screen, Sid Charisse is immortalized in movement. Her performances captured forever in celluloid, still gliding across polished floors, elegant and defiant of time. Her death reminds us that while mortality ends a life, it does not end the impact. Through memory and media, she continues to inspire a world that still finds joy in grace, rhythm, and poise. Gloria Vanderbilt, an emblem of American aristocracy, fashion, and reinvention, died on June 17, 2019, at the age of 95 from stomach cancer. Her death, though peaceful and natural, marked the end of a life that had been anything but quiet. Born into wealth during the height of the Jazz Age, Vanderbilt's life mirrored the sweeping transformations of 20th century America, from the Gilded Age echoes of her childhood to the media-saturated modern era she helped define. Vanderbilt's passing came during a time when America was grappling with questions of identity, privilege, and legacy. Her story offered a poignant lens through which to examine these themes. As a child, she was at the center of a sensational custody battle between her mother and aunt, dubbed the trial of the century by 1930s media. This early exposure to public scrutiny would foreshadow a life lived in both glamour and shadow. Later, she would transform herself into a designer and businesswoman, helping to popularize designer jeans, one of fashion's most democratizing trends, in the 1970s and 1980s. Her pivot from socialite to entrepreneur reflected the changing expectations of women and the growing fusion of celebrity and commerce. The immediate aftermath of her death saw a wave of retrospectives celebrating not just her artistic sensibilities and business acumen, but also her emotional resilience. Her son, journalist Anderson Cooper, offered a deeply personal tribute that reminded audiences of her humanity beneath the fame. Rather than fading into obscurity, Vanderbilt's death reawakened interest in her contributions to American culture, fashion, and personal storytelling. Gloria Vanderbilt's life and death invite reflection on the enduring complexity of fame, inheritance, and self-definition. In a world where legacy is increasingly shaped by public narrative, her story shows that reinvention can be as powerful as inheritance. Through art exhibits, biographies, interviews, and fashion archives, Vanderbilt continues to be remembered not merely as an heiress, but as a creative force who dared to shape her destiny. Her death underscores how mortality, though inevitable, does not extinguish influence. We immortalize figures like Vanderbilt through the cultural artifacts they leave behind, be it a painting, a pair of jeans, or a quote in a memoir, reminding us that memory, like fashion, is a canvas for reinvention. Atrell Cordes, better known by his stage name Prince B, was a central figure in the early 1990s hip-hop and R&B movement as one half of the group PM Dawn. He died on June 17, 2016, at the age of 46, from complications related to diabetes and renal disease. His death, while from natural causes, was shaped by the broader social and health issues that affect many in the African American community, particularly the long-term impact of chronic illness and the disparities in access to quality health care. Chords rose to prominence during a transformative time in American music. PM Dawn's ethereal sound, blending rap, soul, and pop, stood in contrast to the emerging hardcore styles that defined much of 1990s hip-hop. Their breakout hit, Set Adrift on Memory Bliss, which sampled Spandau Ballet's True, exemplified a dreamlike vulnerability rarely seen in rap at the time. Cordes, with his philosophical lyrics and melodic delivery, represented a different kind of masculinity, emotive, introspective, and spiritually questioning. The era during which PM Dawn thrived was marked by the tension between authenticity and commercialization in hip-hop. While some dismissed their softer style as less real, others saw them as pioneers who expanded the genre's emotional and artistic boundaries. Cordes's health struggles later in life, eventually leading to the amputation of a leg and other complications, mirrored the quiet struggles many artists endure behind the spotlight. His declining health and eventual passing were largely overshadowed by the fame of his earlier years, a reminder of how quickly the industry can forget those who do not conform to its prevailing narratives. The immediate consequences of his death were not seismic in the mainstream, but for fans and fellow artists, it reignited appreciation for his musical innovation and the emotional depth he brought to hip-hop. Artists and critics revisited PM Dawn's catalog, recognizing it as ahead of its time and embracing themes of love, vulnerability, and existential reflection. Cordes's death invites broader contemplation on how society remembers artists who challenge norms quietly rather than loudly. Through samples, retrospectives, and genre-blending musicians who followed, his influence endures. We immortalize figures like Astaire Cordes not only through their chart-topping hits, but through the emotional space they carved out in a cultural landscape, spaces where softness was once considered a rebellion. His legacy reminds us that even fleeting voices can echo far beyond their final notes. Jean-Louis Trintignant, the legendary French actor known for his haunting introspection and refined restraint, died on June 17, 2022, at the age of 91 from natural causes following a long battle with prostate cancer. His death marked the quiet conclusion of a career that had spanned more than 6 decades and bridged the evolution of French cinema, from its post-war reawakening to the introspective realism of the 21st century. Trintignant's passing reflected both the grace and gravity with which he lived his artistic life. He was never a flamboyant celebrity. Instead, he embodied a deeper, more contemplative archetype, the thinking man burdened with unspoken emotion. His most enduring roles in films like A Man and a Woman, The Conformist, and Amour dealt not with action or spectacle, but with the psychological landscapes of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. In this way, his death aligned poetically with the themes he often portrayed: mortality, love, silence, and the quiet dignity of acceptance. The immediate response to his death was heartfelt but understated, much like the man himself. Tributes from across Europe highlighted not only his artistic achievements, but also his moral and intellectual depth. In France, where cinema is both an art and a mirror of national identity, Trintignant's loss was particularly poignant. He had become a symbol of a golden age in film, as well as a reminder of the power of subtlety in an increasingly noisy world. Trintignant's life was not without tragedy. The murder of his daughter, actress Marie Trintignant, in 2003 cast a long shadow over his later years and deepened the sorrowful wisdom he brought to subsequent roles. His performance in Michael Haneke's Amour, as an elderly man caring for his dying wife, took on a near autobiographical quality, making his own final exit feel like a coda to a life spent exploring human frailty. In remembering Trintignant, we confront not only his death, but also the passing of an era where restraint and intelligence defined masculinity on screen. His legacy is preserved through his films, which remain masterclasses in understatement and emotional truth. Statues and street names may fade, but the quiet brilliance of Trintignant lives on in every whispered line, in every pause pregnant with meaning. His death reminds us that greatness can speak softly and still echo forever. Arthur Franz, a versatile American actor known for his roles in 1950s war films and science fiction classics, died on June 17, 2006, at the age of 86. His death was due to heart failure, a natural cause that marked the quiet end of a man whose career once resonated with the pulse of mid-century American values. Unlike the dramatic exits of political revolutionaries or cinematic icons, Franz's passing was subtle, reflective of the often overlooked character actors whose contributions quietly shaped Hollywood's golden era. Franz emerged in post-World War II America, a time when cinema was deeply intertwined with national identity and ideological messaging. His frequent portrayals of soldiers and earnest professionals mirrored a society striving for stability, heroism, and moral clarity after the chaos of global conflict. Notably, his performance in The Sniper, 1952, offered a rare and disturbing glimpse into mental illness and violence, challenging audiences to confront uncomfortable realities during a time when such themes were seldom addressed openly. His death did not provoke widespread media coverage or public mourning, a reminder of how fame can fade even as influence lingers. Yet among cinephiles and classic film scholars, his work remains respected. His passing underscored the ephemerality of supporting fame and how cultural memory tends to prioritize leading figures, often neglecting the essential players who enriched the broader tapestry of film history. In a broader sense, Franz's death reflects the challenge of preserving legacy in an age of rapidly shifting attention spans. Whereas figures like Cleopatra or Lincoln became immortalized due to the dramatic circumstances of their deaths and the historical weight of their lives, Franz's impact was quieter, more nuanced, yet still worthy of remembrance. His death invites reflection on how we define legacy. Is it shaped by scale, spectacle, or the steady, consistent craft of a lifetime? Humanity's relationship with memory is selective, but art offers a form of preservation. Franz may not adorn statues or headlines, but his performances endure on film reels, streaming platforms, and within the scholarship of cinema history. Through this medium, his contributions are continually rediscovered, reminding us that even modest legacies can echo across generations, etched not in marble, but in flickering frames of black and white celluloid. Patsy Byrne, the beloved British actress best remembered for her comedic turn as the endearingly daft Nursey in the historical sitcom Blackadder 2, died of natural causes on June 17, 2014, at the age of 80. She passed away in Denville Hall, a care home for actors in London, a fitting final chapter for a woman whose life had been deeply devoted to the theatrical arts. Her death was quiet and dignified, echoing the understated presence she maintained in an industry often dominated by louder personalities and larger egos. Byrne's career unfolded during a time when women in British comedy and drama were carving out space for themselves in both classical theatre and mainstream television. She trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art and spent years honing her craft on stage with the Royal Shakespeare Company before transitioning to television. This era celebrated range and discipline, values Byrne exemplified with her ability to shift from Shakespearean tragedy to absurdist farce with ease. Her death marks the loss of a generation of performers shaped by repertory theater and classical training, actors who brought depth to even the smallest roles. Though her passing did not create widespread media waves, it prompted a wave of affection from fans and colleagues who remembered her warmth, wit, and impeccable timing. In an age when celebrity often overshadows craft, Byrne's legacy reminds us that impact can come not just from starring roles, but from creating unforgettable characters who live on in the public's affection. Nursey may have been a supporting character, but she became iconic, her comedic cadence and innocent absurdity serving as a perfect foil to the biting satire of Blackadder. Her death didn't shift the trajectory of British culture, but it did cause a moment of nostalgic reflection. The response revealed the collective affection for a type of performer who prioritized craft over fame and served as a linchpin of ensemble storytelling. Patsy Burns' legacy lives on not through towering monuments, but through laughter, reruns of her performances, stage anecdotes shared in green rooms, and affectionate impressions by fans. Her death reminds us that memory is not reserved for the powerful alone. Sometimes the echo of a gentle joke, delivered with heart and timing, can immortalize a figure in ways even power cannot. Mohamed Morsi, Egypt's first democratically elected president, died on June 17, 2019 under controversial and troubling circumstances. Collapsing during a court session in Cairo, he died of a heart attack after reportedly being held in solitary confinement for nearly 6 years, with minimal medical care. His sudden death was officially described as natural, yet human rights organizations, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, cited grave concerns over his prison conditions, suggesting state negligence played a role. Morsi's demise reflected the turbulent values and unresolved struggles of post-Arab Spring Egypt. Elected in 2012 after the revolution that toppled Hosni Mubarak, Morsi represented both hope and controversy. As a leading member of the Muslim Brotherhood, he promised democratic reform, but his presidency quickly polarized the nation. His ousting by the military in 2013, led by then-General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, marked a dramatic return to authoritarian governance and sparked deadly crackdowns on Morsi's supporters. His death, therefore, symbolized the death of that brief experiment with electoral democracy in Egypt. The immediate consequence of Morsi's passing was international outcry and scrutiny of Egypt's human rights record. But within the country, the response was muted, an intentional silencing, some critics argue, to erase his legacy. He was buried under tight security, without a public funeral, reinforcing the government's effort to minimize his symbolic power in death. Rather than amplifying Morsi's personal legend, his death became a broader commentary on the cost of political dissent in modern autocracies. For many across the Middle East and beyond, Morsi became a martyr, not necessarily for his policies, but for what his rise and fall represented: the fragility of democratic dreams in a region scarred by decades of repression. His story now lives on in reports, documentaries, and public discourse about the Arab Spring's failed promises. While statues will not likely bear his image and Egyptian state media avoids his name, Mohamed Morsi is remembered in exile communities, in academic analyses, and in digital memorials. His death underscores a timeless truth: power often resists change, and those who challenge it walk a perilous path. Yet history rarely forgets such figures, and memory, even when buried, has a way of resurfacing, demanding justice, reflection, and reckoning. Jeff Chandler, a silver-haired star of Hollywood's golden age, died unexpectedly on June 17, 1961, at the age of 42. The cause of death was a blood infection and complications following back surgery for a spinal disc herniation. What began as a routine procedure spiraled into a fatal medical crisis after a surgical mishap, reportedly involving a major artery being severed, which led to multiple operations and eventually his death from sepsis. His passing shocked both Hollywood and his fan base, occurring at the peak of his career. Chandler's death echoed the fragile line between masculine ideal and human vulnerability, a tension that often defined the post-war era. Known for his deep voice, rugged charm, and stoic portrayals of warriors and Western heroes, Chandler symbolized a brand of mid-century American masculinity rooted in physical strength and moral clarity. His roles in films like Broken Arrow, 1950, for which he received an Academy Award nomination for portraying Apache leader Cochise, reflected an era grappling with themes of racial understanding, heroism, and cultural conflict. Yet his sudden, preventable death peeled back the invincibility his screen persona suggested. The tragedy highlighted a medical system less regulated and far riskier than today's, particularly in elective surgeries. His death helped prompt further scrutiny into hospital safety and patient care, especially for public figures whose influence brought attention to systemic issues. In the aftermath, Chandler's legacy was both celebrated and mourned. Hollywood, which often consumes and replaces its icons swiftly, took a pause to honor a man whose career had steadily climbed. His final film, Merrill's Marauders, 1962, was completed posthumously, casting a poignant light on his lasting presence. The film itself, a gritty war narrative, further etched Chandler's image as a noble soldier of cinema. Chandler's death speaks to a broader human theme, our cultural impulse to mythologize those who die young and seemingly at the height of their powers. His image was immortalized through posthumous tributes, television retrospectives, and the enduring popularity of his films, which continue to air on classic movie channels. His early death helped preserve his cinematic identity in amber, a screen hero forever poised between action and tragedy. In this way, we remember him not just as a man, but as a symbol of a bygone era, frozen in time through art and memory. Pamela Britton, best remembered for her endearing role as Lorelei Brown in the 1960s sitcom My Favorite Martian, died of a brain tumor on June 17, 1974, at the age of 51. Her passing, while due to natural causes, underscored the fleeting nature of television fame and the quiet tragedies often hidden behind the smiles of America's favorite on-screen personalities. Britton's death came during a time when television had become the dominant medium for entertainment and cultural messaging. She was part of the generation of actresses who transitioned from Broadway and film to the small screen, bringing warmth and relatability to mid-century American households. Her roles frequently embodied the era's expectations for women, charming, nurturing, comedic yet composed, mirroring both the optimism and the constraints placed on women during post-war America and into the 1960s. While Britton was not a headline name in the way of contemporaries like Lucille Ball, her death still sent ripples through the industry. For many, she represented the countless character actors who carried shows with consistency and heart, but were often under-recognized in their time. Her passing reminded the public of the often unseen personal struggles of entertainers, particularly women in Hollywood, who faced both immense pressure and limited longevity in their careers. There was no media frenzy, no drawn-out spectacle. Yet in the decades since, Pamela Britton's legacy has been preserved through syndicated reruns and nostalgic tributes to classic television. In this way, her death, while not seismic in historical terms, has helped amplify appreciation for the essential players who shaped the early days of modern entertainment. Her passing also invites broader reflection on mortality and remembrance. While historical giants are often memorialized through monuments and textbooks, figures like Britton are immortalized through the laughter they once brought, the warmth they delivered through the screen, and the roles that continue to introduce them to new generations. Pamela Britton's death and enduring presence in cultural memory highlight humanity's need to preserve joy and connection. Whether through reruns, fan conventions, or digital archives, she lives on, an emblem of a bygone era, reminding us that even quiet departures can leave enduring echoes when love, laughter, and legacy intertwine. Tarsila do Amaral, one of Brazil's most iconic modernist painters, died on January 17, 1973, at the age of 86, from natural causes. Though her passing did not make global headlines at the time, it marked the end of a visionary life that had profoundly influenced Latin American art and culture. Her death, occurring in an era marked by political repression under Brazil's military dictatorship, served as a quiet yet poignant contrast to the bold, expressive energy that defined her art. Tarsila was a key figure in the Brazilian modern art movement and a central participant in the 1922 Week of Modern Art in São Paulo, which revolutionized the nation's aesthetic identity. Her vivid use of color, abstract forms, and incorporation of Brazilian folklore and landscapes helped shape a unique cultural voice during a time when Brazil sought to define itself independently from European traditions. Her paintings, such as Abaporu, became visual manifestos for the anthropophagia, cannibalist movement, which symbolically devoured European culture to create something wholly Brazilian. The peaceful nature of her death stood in contrast to the turbulent world she once sought to transform through radical artistic expression. By the time she passed, Brazil was under authoritarian rule, a far cry from the cultural optimism that fueled her earlier work. Her death did not initially produce a dramatic cultural rupture, but over time, her contributions were re-evaluated and recognized as foundational to Brazil's artistic heritage. In the years following her death, Tarsila's legend grew. Exhibitions of her work traveled internationally, and academic interest in her role as a pioneering woman in modern art surged. She was posthumously celebrated not only for her technical innovation, but also for her political symbolism. A woman who painted Brazil in bold, unapologetic colors when the world often saw it in monochrome. Her legacy has been preserved through national museum collections, scholarly studies, and public monuments, and her influence echoes in contemporary Latin American art. Tarsila do Amaral's death reminds us that cultural revolutions can begin not only with grand gestures, but with the patient brushstrokes of those who dare to imagine differently. Her life and passing reflect the enduring power of art to challenge, define, and immortalize a people's identity, even when the artist herself is no longer there to witness it. On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. José Duane Ricardo Onfroy, better known by his stage name XXXTentacion, met a violent and untimely death on June 18, 2018, at the age of 20. He was shot and killed during a robbery outside a motorcycle dealership in Deerfield Beach, Florida. The attack, carried out in broad daylight, was caught on surveillance cameras and shocked the music world. His death marked not only the tragic end of a rising star, but also illuminated the volatile intersection of fame, youth, and violence in the digital age. XXXTentacion's life was marked by contradiction. Lauded for his raw, emotional music that resonated with millions of disaffected youth, yet also criticized for a history of legal troubles and accusations of domestic abuse. His murder, sudden and brutal, forced both fans and critics to confront the complexity of his legacy. It echoed the challenges of his era, a generation shaped by social media, where artists could rise to fame overnight, only to be consumed by the same culture that built them. The immediate aftermath of his death was a global outpouring of grief. Fans created memorials at the site of the shooting, and his music skyrocketed in streams, breaking records and posthumously topping charts. Songs like Sad and Moonlight gained new emotional weight, with lyrics eerily foreshadowing his death. This phenomenon, where tragedy enhances artistic mythology, is not new, but in XXXTentacion's case, it unfolded in real time across Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, platforms that had fueled both his fame and controversy. In death, his persona transformed from a polarizing figure into a symbol of troubled genius for many young listeners. While debates about separating the art from the artist continue, his influence on a new wave of emo rap artists is undeniable. Tributes in the form of tattoos, murals, and covers keep his image alive, and his posthumous albums sparked ongoing conversation about mental health, redemption, and youth expression. XXXTentacion's death highlights how society grapples with flawed heroes and the permanence of digital legacies. It challenges us to reflect on mortality in an age where lives and deaths are endlessly documented, shared, and reinterpreted. Through music, tribute art, and cultural discourse, his story endures, tangled, tragic, but undeniably impactful, reminding us that memory often elevates complexity into legacy. Anouk Aimée, the luminous French actress whose career spanned over 7 decades, passed away from natural causes on June 18, 2024 at the age of 92. Her death marked the quiet close of a chapter in European cinema, ending the life of an artist who had become an enduring symbol of enigmatic elegance and emotional depth. Aimée rose to prominence in post-war France, a time when cinema was reshaping national identity and grappling with existential themes in the wake of devastation. Her performances, particularly in La Dolce Vita and A Man and a Woman, 1966, channeled the introspective spirit of her era. Her death, though peaceful, reflects a generational transition, the gradual fading of stars who embodied the artistic ferment of mid-20th century Europe. She belonged to a period when cinema was not only entertainment, but also philosophy, poetry, and protest. The immediate response to Aimé's death was a global tribute to her legacy. Filmmakers, actors, and cinephiles across generations expressed their admiration for her haunting screen presence and minimalist style. Though she never actively courted fame, Aimée became a muse for directors like Federico Fellini and Claude Lelouch, and her work influenced a new wave of actresses who saw vulnerability and mystery as artistic strengths rather than limitations. Her passing did not create political upheaval or widespread mourning in the way a statesman's might, but it reignited interest in the golden age of European cinema. Retrospectives of her work appeared in film festivals and streaming platforms, drawing in younger audiences who had perhaps never seen her understated brilliance. In this way, death served as a catalyst for rediscovery rather than legend-making, a reminder of the quiet power of consistency and authenticity. Anouk Aimé's death, like her life, was marked by grace and restraint. It reminds us that not all cultural shifts happen in explosive moments. Some unfold like a slow fade, barely perceptible until we reflect. Her legacy endures not through grand monuments or controversy, but through film, the flicker of light on screen that preserves memory long after breath has stilled. In immortalizing figures like Aimée, we are reminded that mortality may claim the person, but art can make them eternal. Willie Mays, often hailed as the greatest all-around baseball player in history, passed away on June 18, 2024, at the age of 93. His death was from natural causes, the quiet end to a life that had once electrified stadiums and transformed the landscape of American sports. Mays's passing not only marked the end of an era, but reignited conversations about race, excellence, and cultural memory in the world of athletics. Born in 1931 in segregated Alabama, Mays began his career in the Negro Leagues before debuting in Major League Baseball with the New York Giants in 1951. His rise mirrored the gradual integration of professional sports, a process that reflected both the triumphs and ongoing struggles of the civil rights movement. By the time of his retirement in 1973, Mays had become a symbol of dignity, talent, and perseverance, not just for black athletes, but for the nation at large. His death came at a time when American society continued to grapple with racial equity and the meaning of heroism. The widespread mourning following his passing, from major league ballparks to street murals in his honor, reflected a yearning for icons whose legacies transcended their statistics. Mays wasn't just known for his 660 home runs or his famous over-the-shoulder catch in the 1954 World Series. He represented an ideal of grace under pressure, achievement without arrogance. The immediate consequence of his death was a national outpouring of respect. Tributes poured in from fellow athletes, presidents, and fans spanning generations. Moments of silence were held across sports arenas, and documentaries revisiting his life aired within days. His passing reignited discussions about how we commemorate sports legends and how Black pioneers in American history are remembered, or too often forgotten. In reflecting on Willie Mays's death, we see how mortality confronts even the most legendary among us, but also how memory grants them a second life. Through statues, films, baseball cards, and stories passed from parent to child, Mays lives on. His departure reminds us that while power and fame may fade, the values embodied, discipline, courage, humility, can outlast time. We immortalize such figures not only through accolades but by choosing to carry forward what they stood for. José Saramago, the Portuguese Nobel laureate whose novels blended history, allegory, and political critique, died of natural causes on June 18, 2010, at the age of 87. His death, peaceful and expected after a long illness, contrasted with the bold, often unsettling narratives he constructed in life. Saramago's passing marked the loss of one of the most distinctive literary voices of the 20th and early 21st centuries, a writer who challenged readers to confront power, morality, and the fragility of human society. Born into poverty in rural Portugal in 1922, Saramago rose from humble beginnings to international acclaim. His works, such as Blindness, The Gospel According to Jesus Christ, and Balthazar and Blamunda, questioned institutional authority, particularly the church and state, and examined how ordinary people respond to extraordinary circumstances. When he died at his home in Lanzarote, Spain, he had long been in self-imposed exile, having moved there after a political dispute with the Portuguese government in the 1990s over censorship of his religiously controversial works. Saramago's death reflected the philosophical essence of his life and era, a time of growing disillusionment with traditional institutions and a yearning for humanistic truth. In an age marked by the rise of authoritarian tendencies, economic instability, and global inequity, Saramago's voice stood out as one that refused to flinch in the face of injustice. His calm passing did not spark public unrest, but it did trigger waves of intellectual mourning across Europe and Latin America, where his ideas had taken deep root. The immediate consequences included tributes from political leaders, cultural institutions, and readers who saw him as more than a novelist, as a moral compass. The José Saramago Foundation, established before his death, redoubled its efforts to preserve his legacy through cultural and educational programs. His funeral drew international attention, and the Portuguese government declared 2 days of national mourning, recognizing the immense cultural weight of his contributions. In death, Saramago's legend only deepened. Through adaptations of his work, commemorative essays, statues, and inclusion in curricula worldwide, he remains a symbol of literary resistance and ethical reflection. His death reminds us that while the body is finite, ideas endure, and that literature has the power to challenge, comfort, and above all, remember. Nancy Marchand, the esteemed stage and screen actress best known for her commanding performances in Lou Grant and The Sopranos, died on June 18, 2000 from lung cancer and emphysema. Her death, though due to natural causes, resonated deeply within the entertainment world, not only because of her talent, but because it came at a pivotal moment in her most iconic role. Marchand's passing underscored the evolving nature of television as a medium for complex, mature storytelling and reflected the fragility of legacy in an era of shifting cultural narratives. Marchand had a career that spanned over 5 decades, rooted in the golden age of television and refined through numerous stage appearances. However, it was her portrayal of Livia Soprano, the cold, manipulative matriarch in HBO's The Sopranos, that reintroduced her to a new generation and cemented her place in television history. Her death occurred during the early seasons of the groundbreaking show, at a time when her character was integral to the psychological underpinnings of the protagonist, Tony Soprano. Her loss created an immediate challenge for the series, which had to creatively rewrite and adapt key storylines. In a controversial but brief move, digital effects were used to replicate her character for a single posthumous scene. The emotional weight of her absence shifted the tone of the series, contributing to Tony's increasingly introspective arc and setting a precedent for how television handles the death of a key performer. Marchand's death, though not tragic in the conventional sense, illuminated the transitional era she bridged between the traditional model of prestige theater acting and the rise of television as a platform for nuanced, cinematic performance. Her passing symbolized the departure of a classically trained generation, just as a more contemporary, media-saturated era of storytelling was emerging. In the years since her death, Nancy Marchand has been honored through retrospectives, posthumous award recognition, and in the enduring legacy of The Sopranos, a show that revolutionized television. Her work continues to be studied in acting schools and cited in critical discussions on female character complexity. Marchand's death reminds us that mortality, even when expected, leaves a void that challenges how stories are told and remembered. Through her performances, she is immortalized, etched not in stone but in frames of film and memory, where her presence still casts a long shadow. Jack Buck, the legendary American sportscaster known for his iconic voice and emotional resonance, passed away from natural causes on June 18, 2002, at the age of 77. He died of complications from lung cancer and Parkinson's disease in St. Louis, Missouri, a city that had become synonymous with his career. His death marked the end of an era in American sports broadcasting, closing the chapter on one of the last voices from a time when radio brought baseball to life in millions of homes across the country. Buck's death came at a time when broadcasting was undergoing dramatic change. The rise of television and digital media had begun to transform how fans engaged with sports, yet Buck remained a steadfast symbol of a more personal, story-driven style. His voice, rich and sincere, had narrated some of the most memorable moments in American sports history. From Kirk Gibson's improbable 1988 World Series home run to Ozzie Smith's game-winning blast in 1985, punctuated by his famous exclamation, "Go crazy, folks!" His passing struck a deep chord, particularly in St. Louis, where he had been the voice of the Cardinals for nearly 50 years. The city mourned him as a civic icon, and fans across the nation reflected on the profound emotional connections forged by his words.